The journey toward unbreakable strength begins not with a grand external conquest, but with a quiet internal revolution, the reclamation of the self. When a man steps away from the relentless cycle of seeking a partner's validation or navigating the constant compromises of a relationship, he steps into a profound space of autonomy. This initial stage of solitude is often mislabeled as loneliness or lack, but in truth, it is the first crucial chapter of building a foundation that few men ever experience. It is here that he learns the fundamental principle of total ownership. His days are no longer a negotiation, a series of trades where his time, energy, and ambitions are balanced against someone else's shifting emotions and needs. He wakes each morning, and his time is his own canvas. If his vision demands a relentless grind, he grinds without apology. If his body and mind require deep rest, he rests without guilt. If an opportunity carries risk, he weighs it against his own metrics and leaps without having to justify his reasoning to a skeptical partner. This autonomy is the fertile ground in which self-trust takes root and flourishes. Every decision, from the mundane to the life-altering, rests solely on his shoulders. There is no committee, no safety net of shared blame, no soft landing of constant reassurance. When he succeeds, the victory is entirely his, and its sweetness is undiluted. When he fails, the lesson is equally his to absorb, and its sting carries the pure, unmediated feedback necessary for genuine growth. This uninterrupted cycle of action, consequence, and reflection is how a man builds an unwavering faith in his own judgment. He learns his true capacities, his limits, and his resilience not from what he is told, but from what he experiences directly. The silence he once feared becomes his greatest teacher, revealing his character to himself with unflinching clarity. This is not a path of isolation for its own sake, but a purposeful forging. The strength built here is not the brittle kind that shatters under pressure. It is the resilient, flexible strength of a man who knows bone deep that he can endure because he already has. He has faced the quiet of his own company, and not only survived but begun to build a kingdom within it. This self-possession, this hard-won independence, becomes the unshakable core from which all future strength will emanate. It is the first and most important lesson of solitude, that freedom is not the absence of responsibility, but the assumption of complete responsibility for oneself. With the foundation of self-ownership firmly laid, a profound shift occurs in the single man's life, the reclamation and redirection of his energy. The immense mental and emotional resources that were once scattered constantly expended on the chase for romance, the management of a partner's expectations, or the navigation of relationship drama are now consolidated into a single powerful stream. This concentration of focus is transformative. He is no longer a man divided, his attention split between his own ambitions and the demands of another. Instead, he becomes a man of singular purpose, and that purpose is his own evolution. The hours once lost to texting, arguing, or compromising are now ours invested. He channels this reclaimed energy into building his career with an intensity that others cannot muster, strengthening his body with a consistency that was previously impossible, and sharpening his mind through study and reflection that is undisturbed by emotional noise. This disciplined channeling of effort is not a grim duty, but a conscious investment in the most valuable asset he will ever own, himself. He begins to refine his daily habits, not as a performance for someone else, but because he has developed a visceral understanding of the direct link between discipline and freedom. He recognizes that a disorganized life is a dependent life, vulnerable to chaos and external control. Therefore, he wakes earlier, not because he has to, but because the quiet morning hours are a gift of uninterrupted productivity. He eats cleaner and trains harder, not for fleeting approval, but because he respects the vessel that carries him toward his goals. He saves more money, building a fortress of financial independence that grants him the power of choice. This is the forging of an unshakable frame of core identity built on self-accountability. Every completed workout, every skill mastered, every dollar saved, is another brick laid in the structure of his new self. Over time, This discipline ceases to be an effort and becomes second nature. The default operating system of a man who is in complete command of his own life. The gap between him and the man who remains externally focused begins to widen into a chasm. While the latter seeks purpose and validation from another, the single man generates it from within. This self-sufficiency is the source of a quiet, undeniable power that permeates his every action, setting him on a trajectory that is entirely his own. The crucible of solitude forces a confrontation that cannot be outsourced, the battle with the inner self. Without the convenient escape of a partner's comfort, the distraction of romantic highs, or the drama of a relationship to externalize his turmoil, a man is left alone in the silent arena of his own mind. This is where true emotional mastery begins, not in the avoidance of chaos, but in the direct engagement with it. There is no one to soothe his frustrations, validate his insecurities, or absorb his anger. He is forced to sit with these difficult emotions, to observe their rise and fall without acting out. He learns to regulate not by seeking reassurance from another, but by developing an internal compass. He discovers that calm is not the absence of storm, but the ability to find a still point within it. This process is brutal and unforgiving, but it forges a core of steel. The man who emerges is unshakable, no longer thrown off balance by the emotional currents of others, because he has learned to navigate the far more turbulent waters within himself. Simultaneously, freed from the constant emotional static and subjective pull of a partnership, his perception of the external world sharpens to an almost preternatural clarity. He becomes a master observer, studying the human landscape from a place of quiet detachment. His instincts, no longer clouded by desire or the need to please, become his most trusted advisors. He begins to notice the patterns that govern behavior, the subtle tells of body language that betray true intention, the slight shifts in tone that reveal hidden meaning, the unspoken cues that most men, lost in the fog of their own neediness, completely overlook. This heightened awareness is a defensive mechanism honed in silence. He can sense disingenuousness, discern manipulation, and identify a lack of respect long before it is overtly displayed. This allows him to sidestep the traps, drama, and emotional games that ensnare weaker, less perceptive men. By the time he chooses to re-enter the social world, he does so not as a desperate participant, but as a discerning strategist. Tears, silence, or threats of abandonment, which once might have triggered panic or compliance, now register as data points. They no longer hold power over him because he has already faced the deepest source of his own fear, the prospect of being alone with himself, and has not only survived, but emerged victorious. His power now comes from a deep, unassailable inner peace, making him immune to the superficial storms that break other men. A man who has built a complete and fulfilling life, independent of a partner, begins to radiate an energy that is both rare and irresistible. The aura of non-need. This is not an act or a strategy, but the natural emanation of a soul that has become self-contained. Women, often subconsciously attuned to the subtle signals of neediness and validation seeking in men, can feel this shift immediately. It is present in his calm, unhurried demeanor, the steady gaze that does not seek approval, and the simple, unspoken fact that he does not require their attention to feel whole. This self-sufficiency is magnetic because it stands in stark contrast to the desperation that characterizes so much of modern dating. While other men bend, beg, and perform, trying to earn affection through constant effort and compromise, this man simply exists in his own power. He does not chase. He attracts. His high standards are not a checklist for others, but a reflection of the life he has already built for himself. He no longer tolerates environments, habits, or connections that drain his energy or disrupt his peace, because he knows the profound cost of rebuilding what was carelessly given away. This fundamental shift in his state of being completely upends the traditional dynamics of courtship. He no longer approaches a woman from a place of lack, seeking to enter her world and win a place in it. Instead, his energy acts as an invitation for her to step into the world he has meticulously created. His frame, composed of his purpose, his discipline, and his boundaries, becomes the central gravity of any interaction. This detachment is not coldness. It is the foundation of his power. It means his time, attention, and affection are not freely given commodities, but valuable resources offered only to those who demonstrate they are worthy. Ironically, this very inaccessibility is what fuels intense attraction. Women instinctively crave what they must earn, and they respect a man who holds his ground. His lack of need makes him unpredictable and immune to the usual games of emotional manipulation. Threats of withdrawal or tests of loyalty simply do not land, because he has already proven to himself that he can thrive in solitude. This unnerves and excites in equal measure, creating a powerful tension. He becomes a mirror, forcing a woman to confront her own behavior and intentions. In his presence, she cannot rely on manipulation to secure his interest. She must instead step up, bring genuine value, and show her own integrity. The man who does not need a woman, paradoxically, becomes the one she cannot afford to lose. For he offers the one thing a needy man cannot, a love that is chosen from a place of abundance, not demanded from a place of desperation. The final stage of a man's transformation in solitude is not merely about reaching a new level of personal power, but about transcending the very arena the journey began in. The focus shifts entirely from the self in relation to others to the self in relation to time, impact, and legacy. This is the chapter of sovereign legacy, where a man begins to think generationally, while weaker men remain trapped in cycles of chasing short-term validation and fleeting romantic highs. The man forged in solitude lifts his gaze to the horizon. His internal dialogue changes from "how can I attract her?" to "what am I building that will outlast me? What mark will my existence leave on the world?" This forward-thinking mindset is the ultimate expression of his discipline and self-ownership. He is no longer living in reaction to the emotional winds of the moment, but acting with intention toward a future he is actively architecting. He understands that his life is his ultimate project, and he approaches it with the gravity of a master builder, laying foundations for structures meant to stand for generations. This expansive vision is fueled by the compounding dividends of his earlier discipline. The years of investing in his body, mind, and resources were not isolated acts of self-improvement. They were strategic deposits into the capital of his future. Each skill mastered, each dollar saved and invested, each layer of resilience added to his character multiplies his capacity for impact. He becomes sharper, stronger, and more formidable with each passing year. By the time the wider world, including the women who may have once overlooked him, begins to recognize his worth, he has already built so much substance and value that their approval or attention becomes irrelevant, a mere footnote in the epic he is writing. This is the ultimate irony of the path. The moment he truly no longer needs validation is the precise moment. It comes flooding in from all sides. Yet he views this newfound attention with a clarity born of his journey. He no longer sees potential partners through the lens of desperate desire, but through the lens of his own unwavering standards. He is not a beggar hoping to be chosen. He is a sovereign conducting an interview, seeking not someone to complete him, but someone who can add value to an already complete and thriving kingdom. The respect he now commands is a tangible force, but it does not come from his words, his possessions, or any external trappings of success. It emanates from his energy, a quiet frequency that people feel when he enters a room. It is the resonance of a man who has made peace with silence, who has held the line when it was difficult, and who has consistently chosen the hard right over the easy wrong. This energy is unearned by others, and thus cannot be taken away. It forces those around him, and women in particular, to adjust their behavior instinctively. They weigh their words more carefully. They consider their actions more thoughtfully. Not because he demands it, but because his very presence commands a higher level of engagement. He does not have to ask for respect. He receives it as his natural due, simply by virtue of who he has become. This separates the man who is truly respected from the man who is merely tolerated. Crucially, this final transformation reveals the profound truth that the entire journey was never about women at all. The mission was never to get more dates, to win back an ex, or to make her regret her choices. Those were merely the superficial ghosts that haunted the weaker man he used to be. The true mission was always about building a self so full of purpose and meaning that relationships with women become a potential bonus, a delightful byproduct, rather than the central objective of his existence. The supreme irony is that when a man stops chasing women and becomes utterly consumed by his own purpose, women begin to gravitate toward him. They are instinctively drawn to a man who is locked into a mission bigger than them, a man whose gravitational pull comes from a star they cannot dim. Yet, even when surrounded by this attention, the wise man does not get lost in it. He remembers the long, silent nights, the pain of self-confrontation, and the strength that was forged in the absolute absence of any audience. That memory is his anchor, preventing him from ever compromising his hard-won sovereignty for the temporary pleasure of validation. It is this unwavering commitment to his own core that keeps him rare, powerful, and ultimately free. By this final stage, he is unrecognizable from the man who began the path. The needy, validation-seeking individual has been entirely replaced by a figure of sharp focus, deep calm, and unassailable grounding. Women who once believed they could manipulate him now hesitate to even approach, sensing an immovable object. Men who once dismissed him now offer a silent, grudging respect. Looking back, he sees that the struggle was not a curse, but a crucible. The loneliness, the doubt, the relentless internal battles, these were not wasted seasons of his life. They were the necessary fires that burned away his weakness and tempered his spirit. Standing on this pinnacle of his own making, he sees the fundamental truth that most men will never grasp, that genuine strength is never given. It is earned through solitary trial. And once it is earned, the world does not bend you to its will. You find that the world naturally bends to accommodate the unshakable reality of who you are. He wins, not by conquering others, but by having first conquered the only enemy that ever truly mattered, the weaker man he was yesterday.